Alright guys, I'm Mike with Any Car Log, and today we're going to be talking about common four-wheel drive issues. So if you have a S10 or any of the S series vehicles, a GMC Sonoma, GMC Jimmy, or an S10 Blazer like I have, these tips will help you out, so stay tuned. Alright guys, if you have a S10, you may be watching this video because you're having an issue right now, or you may just want to know for future what issues may come up. So I'm going to walk through basically the systems of the four-wheel drive and some of the common issues. So we've got basically three common parts that fail. So there's you have your front differential, which has a selector engagement. It's got a two-piece axle on the passenger side, and there's a collar that has to move over and lock that passenger side in for the four-wheel drive to work. Second thing is the transfer case. The transfer case on most of these is electronic, so you need the transfer case to engage four-wheel drive to get four-wheel drive to work, engage that front drive shaft. And then the third issue has to do with the transfer case, but it's the air system that allows the transfer case to operate the front differential. So let's get started with the transfer case. The manual version of these, the 231 MP231C, that's a great option if you've got a 97 or older with the manual lever on the floor. That's the best option. Pretty much very little failures there. The electronic version, either the 3-button 233 or the auto transfer case as well with the 4 buttons, they have more complications that go with them. There's the electronic system, which includes the button. There's a button on the dash, which will have either 3 or 4 buttons, depending on which transfer case it is. And you will need to, there's a possibility of those buttons failing. On my GMC Sonoma, it has the 3-button version, and you would push the button, the lights would flash on and off sometimes, so you'd push the button and it wouldn't work sometimes, and then other times it would. So I had to take that switch apart and re-solder some of the contacts. There was some cold solder joints where the connections were no longer making where the buttons were no longer making a connection with the terminal board. So I had to resolder those, and that resolved the switch issue. So the switches themselves can fail. When your buttons are working properly and you push one of these selections, you should hear a click of a relay on the passenger side floor. The electronic brain that controls the transfer case on these is on the passenger side floor by the kick panel. There's a little computer in there that controls it. You should hear that clicking. As long as that's clicking, then your transfer case should be getting the signal. Then on the transfer case itself is an electric motor, which has to actually move a gear in there that selects your different selections. So when you push the buttons, you should hear the click of the relay, and then if you have your door open, your window open, you should be able to hear the transfer case actually clicking of that selection moving. So if all the electronics are working properly, your front drive shaft will then be powered to send power to the front wheels. The front differential, now there's a slide collar in there that needs to be activated. That actuation is triggered by a switch on either the transfer case or your firewall. If you have the 3-button version, it's a vacuum system that goes down to your transfer case. When your transfer case is in four-wheel drive mode, it'll then send suction, vacuum, to a diaphragm that is located underneath your battery. That diaphragm then sucks in and pulls a cable. That cable then goes down to the front differential, where it slides the slide collar over the front differential to lock the two pieces together and give you four-wheel drive. So it's a very complicated system, a lot of moving parts that can fail. So one of the easiest, best upgrades you can do for the front differential to make sure you always get your front differential locked is a Bravada front axle shaft swap. The Bravada axle shaft is a solid one piece. There's no vacuum system, there's no disconnect. It's always going to be engaged, which does hurt fuel economy slightly. It's usually not much to be noticed. But it is basically designed for the Bravadas, where there's all-wheel drive, there's always power going in the front. So it works on the Bravadas being always powered, so it's not going to hurt it. It's just going to be slightly less fuel efficient that way. The other option is replacing the vacuum system and the short cable that goes underneath the battery box, replacing that with a longer full cable system, a cable lock, which I do have. And that cable lock then puts a control inside the cabin where you can pull the cable and it pulls the front differential to lock. I have the cable lock and I'm going to attempt to put it on this vehicle. The reason I didn't use it on my Sonoma is when I got my Sonoma, four-wheel drive didn't work. So what I did was buy the cable lock, installed it, went to go test it, still didn't work. The vacuum system is not being reliable and always having issues either with the switch on the transfer case. That switch can get stuck and cause either full vacuum or partial vacuum, or having a vacuum leak or a bad diaphragm can cause the coupler that's on the front differential to either be engaged all the time or partially engaged sometimes, or go in and out irregularly. So what happened was on mine, had some slight vacuum on it, which then caused it to be slightly engaged part of the time, and it chewed up the gears. So once the gears were chewed up, there was a C-clip that popped out of place and the front disconnect was not working at all. So using the cable locker, which is a great option, didn't work in my case, and won't work for some people. That is kind of a common issue, is for those gears to get chewed up in there. So one thing to keep in mind when you do look to get a cable locker is make sure that your front differential actually does fully engage when you pull that cable. So I will try to show you where the cable is. On this vehicle, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I don't have four-wheel drive currently. I've got snow tires on it, still handles great in the snow, but I don't have four-wheel drive. And that is because I plan to either use the cable locker or eventually install the Bravada shaft. So currently I've removed I had to pull the battery. Currently I don't have the vacuum system connected because I did plan on eventually going to a Bravada shaft. So I had the battery out for some work and I decided to pull the actuator out and all of the components to go with the vacuum system out at the same time. So I will try to show you where the cable is and what it looks like. Alright guys, so that black cable you see right there up against my red battery terminal is the cable that goes down to the front differential. In a pinch, if I needed four-wheel drive, I could rig up some pliers to pull that cable and keep it pulled in order to engage my front differential, but I just haven't had to do that yet. But that is the cable that would normally plug into the vacuum actuator, and then the vacuum system would pull that cable. Alright guys, so one thing to note, if you do go with either the cable locker or the Bravada shaft in the front, when your computer is engaging the four-wheel drive, one thing to note is that there's a signal wire on the front differential that tells the computer that the front differential is actually engaged. So what you want to do is take those wires. What I've done is just follow them up, cut the wire shorter, splice them together so that the signal is always saying that the front differential is connected. It doesn't cause any lights to turn on or anything like that with the four-wheel drive. But if you go into four-wheel drive, everything works properly. So that is one thing to remember. Make sure to find the wires. They're easy to find. They're the only two electrical wires going down to the front differential. Trace them up the driver's side fender, and there's a connector in there. I usually leave the connector in place and then just cut the wires just after the connector, splice them together, and leave the connector plugged in. So if I really wanted to, I could always replace it. But that's what I do. I've got it done to this vehicle because there is no front differential system right now. But I've got it done to my Bravada shaft swapped GMC Sonoma. The Bravada shaft is actually not that hard to install. You do have to pull the passenger side suspension apart. You got to pull the knuckle off and allow you to pull the drive axle, CV axle out, and then you can pull the passenger side tube off, leaving the main differential in place, but the whole passenger side tube has to come off and the two-piece axle shaft comes out. You put in the new shaft, the new tube. Actually, you can put the new tube on first and then slide the new shaft in. And then on the Bravada shaft, I removed one of the C-clips off of the CV axle side. So there's still a C-clip that connects into the main differential, but there is not a C-clip on the outer CV shaft. And I've heard that there can be some issues if you try to use that clip. It won't engage or causes issues, so I just removed it from what I read online. But if you wanted to go a different route, there's a company called Outfitter Designs that makes a shaft to go in place of a Bravada shaft. I think it's like $300, maybe a little bit more with shipping and everything. But it's really not a bad price for what it is. It's a good quality shaft, and then it comes with a plate to convert the tube to basically not have any of the controls that would normally connect for the vacuum system. So if you have any questions on the four-wheel drive system of an S10 or Blazer, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I read the comments. You can also go to anycarlog.com, and there's a section there to leave any questions or video suggestions, so feel free to check out that website. Otherwise, hopefully this video helps you, and I'm constantly making videos on this Blazer. More videos will be coming of the Sonoma and some of my other projects, so stay tuned to the channel, hit the subscribe button if you liked the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.